Imagine waking up to find 35 houses built on your land, your sanctuary, by a greedy HOA that never asked permission. My heart pounded as I stood on my property. Now unrecognizable, their bulldozers still roaring. They thought they could bully me, a lone homeowner, into submission with their rules and lawyers. But I had a secret weapon, a dam, holding back a force they never saw coming. One turn of a valve could change everything. Would I unleash chaos to reclaim what's mine or let them win? Stick around to see how far I wouldn't make them pay. The sun dipped low over the rolling hills of my 50-acre property, casting golden light across the fields I'd worked for decades. I'm Tom, a third-generation farmer, and this land in rural Willow Creek was my everything, my home, my livelihood, my legacy. The old farmhouse creaked with memories of my grandparents' laughter, and the barn still smelled of hay and hard-won harvests. Life was simple. Rise with the dawn, tend the crops, and watch the stars at night. The nearby Willow Creek Estates, a gated community of manicured lawns and shiny SUVs, felt like another world. Its homeowners association, with their endless rules, never bothered me. My land was outside their jurisdiction, or so I thought. I'd wave to neighbors jogging past my fence, their lives a stark contrast to my calloused hands and muddy boots. We coexisted peacefully, two worlds sharing a county road. But peace has a way of slipping through your fingers. I'd heard whispers at the local feed store, talk of the HOA's new president, a sharp-eyed lawyer named Margaret, who had big plans to elevate the area. I didn't pay much mind. My land, deeded to my family a century ago, was untouchable. I spent my days fixing fences, checking the irrigation dam up the hill, and planning the next planting season. The dam, a relic from my grandfather's time, held back a small reservoir that fed my fields. It was my lifeline, a quiet giant I maintained with care. Life felt steady, predictable. Then came the first sign of trouble. One crisp autumn morning, I found a letter in my mailbox, stamped with the Willow Creek Estates logo. It wasn't a neighborly note. It was a legal notice, claiming my land was encroaching on their expansion plans. My stomach churned as I read their demand. Surrender 40 acres for the new development or face consequences. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I crumpled the letter, my jaw tight, and looked out at my fields. This was my home. I wasn't giving up an inch. The letter sat like a stone in my gut. Its words, encroachment, legal action, burning in my mind as I stood on my porch, staring at the fields that had been my family's for a century. I wasn't about to let some HOA in their gated fortress dictate what happened to my land. But the piece of my 50 acres was already unraveling, and what came next would test every ounce of my resolve. The first blow landed a week later. I woke to the growl of machinery, a sound that didn't belong on my quiet mornings. Stepping outside, I saw bulldozers and surveyors swarming the edge of my property, just beyond my fence. Orange stakes dotted the ground, marking a grid that stretched across my back 40 acres. My heart raced as I grabbed my boots and stormed over. A man in a hard hat, clipboard in hand, barely looked up as I demanded answers. Willow Creek Estates expansion, he said flatly, approved by the HOA. I pointed to my property line, my voice shaking. This is my land. He shrugged, muttering something about eminent domain and permits, then turned back to his crew. I felt the ground shift beneath me. My sanctuary was under siege. Back at the farmhouse, I dug through my deed. The ink faded, but the boundaries clear. My land wasn't part of their community, and they had no claim to it. I called the county office, expecting a quick resolution, but the clerk's voice was hesitant. There's a new development plan on file, she said. The HOA's got lawyers and county board connections. You'll need to contest it formally. Contest it? This was my home, not a bargaining chip. I hung up, my hands trembling, and noticed a new letter on my doorstep. It was another HOA notice, this time demanding I remove my unauthorized irrigation dam because it posed a flood risk to their planned homes. The dam, my grandfather's pride, the lifeblood of my fields, was now a target. I crumpled the paper, my pulse pounding. They weren't just after my land. They wanted to choke my livelihood. Days turned into weeks, and the HOA's pressure tightened like a noose. Surveyors kept creeping closer, their stakes inching onto my soil. I'd pull them up at dawn, only to find new ones by dusk. Then came the fines, $500 for obstructing development, $200 for unapproved fencing, even $100 for my tractor's excessive noise. Each notice arrived with Margaret's name, the HOA president, stamped in bold. I'd never met her, but her reputation preceded her, a lawyer who wielded rules like a weapon, turning Willow Creek Estates into her personal fiefdom. Neighbors whispered about her at the feed store. How she'd find a family for planting daisies instead of approved shrubs. How she threatened to lean a retiree's home over an unpainted mailbox. She was untouchable, backed by a board of yes-men, and a legal fund that dwarfed my savings. I fought back the only way I knew how. I hired a local attorney, a grizzled man named Carl who'd seen his share of small-town battles. He pored over my deed and the HOA's claims, his brow furrowing. "They're exploiting a zoning loophole," he said, adjusting his glasses. "The county rezoned part of your land for residential use without notifying you. It's shady but legal for now." He filed a cease and desist, but the HOA's response was a thicker packet of legal jargon, citing community benefit and eminent domain. My savings dwindled with every legal fee, and the bulldozers never stopped. One morning, I caught a surveyor spray painting my fence. "Get off my land." I shouted, my voice raw. He smirked, pointing to a new sign. Future site at Willow Creek Estates Phase 2. My chest tightened. They were already naming their victory. The harassment grew pettier, more personal. My mailbox was vandalized, spray painted with "comply or leave." My irrigation pipes were clogged with cement, costing me a week's crops. I reported it to the sheriff, but he just sighed. "HOAs are a nightmare, Tom, but unless you've got proof it's them, my hands are tied." Proof? The stakes, the fines, the bulldozers, weren't those enough? I started sleeping with a flashlight by my bed, waking at every creak, half expecting to find Margaret herself sneaking onto my land. My fields, once a place of peace, felt like a battlefield. Every day brought a new violation notice, each one chipping away at my spirit. I'd stand by the dam at dusk, its concrete face solid and unmoving, and wonder how much more I could take. Then came the public meeting. The HOA announced a town hall to discuss the expansion, and Carl urged me to go. "Show them you're not backing down," he said. I walked into the community center, a sea of pressed khakis and judgmental stares. Margaret stood at the podium, her smile sharp as a blade. She unveiled glossy renderings of 35 luxury homes, a golf course, and a clubhouse, all on my land. The crowd clapped like it was already done. I stood, my voice steady but loud. "That's my property you're planning to steal." The room went silent. Margaret's eyes locked on mine, her smile never wavering. "Mr. Harlan, your land is an obstacle to progress," she said. "We're prepared to compensate you generously." The crowd murmured approval, but her words felt like a threat. I left, my fists clenched, knowing compensation meant surrender. The final straw came a month later. I returned from town to find a chain-link fence cutting through my fields, enclosing 10 acres of my best soil. A sign read, "Property of Willow Creek Estates." My vision blurred with rage. I grabbed a sledgehammer, ready to tear it down, but Carl's warning echoed. "Act in anger, and they'll bury you in court." I dropped the hammer, my breath ragged, and looked up at the dam. Its reservoir glimmered under the moonlight, a quiet force waiting for release. The HOA thought they'd won, that their money and lawyers could crush me, but they didn't know the power I held, or how close they were to facing it. Each night, I'd walk the property line, the stakes glowing like taunts in the dark. The HOA's plans were accelerating, permits approved, groundbreaking scheduled. Margaret sent a final letter, offering a settlement that wouldn't cover half my land's value. "Accept or we'll take it all," it read. I stood by the dam, its valve cold under my hand, and felt a spark of defiance ignite. They'd pushed me too far, underestimated the man they were fighting. The water behind that dam could change everything, but could I really unleash it? The answer was coming, and it would shake Willow Creek to its core. The air was thick with tension as I stood at the edge of my property, the HOA's chain-link fence glinting under the midday sun like a taunt carved in steel. For months, Willow Creek Estates had tightened their grip, fines, vandalism, legal threats, and now 35 homes planned on my stolen land. My fields, my family's legacy, were slipping away under Margaret's iron rule. But I wasn't the same Tom who'd crumpled their first letter. Rage had forged something harder in me, and the dam, my silent ally up the hill, held the key to turning this fight around. Today, I'd make my stand. It started with a rumor at the feed store. The HOA's groundbreaking ceremony was set for that afternoon, a public spectacle to cement their victory. Margaret and her board would be there, posing for photos as bulldozers tore into my soil. I'd spent the night before at the dam, its valve gleaming under my flashlight, my mind racing. Carl had warned me. Any reckless move could land me in court, bankrupt and broken. But the sight of that fence, slicing through my fields, had snapped something inside me. I wasn't surrendering. Not today. Not ever. I drove to the county courthouse at dawn, clutching a folder of documents, my deed, old permits, and a dusty blueprint of the dam's original design. Carl had found a crack in the HOA's armor. The rezoning of my land was rushed, missing a critical environmental review tied to the dam's reservoir. If I could prove the HOA's expansion endangered the area, I might halt their plans. But proof required action, not just paper. I filed an emergency injunction, my hands shaking as the clerk stamped it. "You got 24 hours to make your case," she said. Time was tight, but I had a plan, one Margaret would never see coming. By noon, the groundbreaking ceremony was in full swing. I parked my truck at the edge of my property, where a crowd of HOA residents, reporters, and county officials gathered. Margaret stood on a makeshift stage, her smile polished as she praised the future of Willow Creek Estates. Behind her, renderings of luxury homes mocked my fields. My chest burned as I slipped through the crowd unnoticed and hiked up the hill to the dam. Its concrete face loomed, steady and unyielding, the valve cold under my palm. I'd maintained it for years, knowing its power. One turn could unleash a torrent, not enough to destroy, but enough to send a message. My heart pounded. This was it. I waited until Margaret's speech hit its peak, her voice booming about community progress. The crowd clapped, oblivious to the faint rumble growing upstream. I turned the valve just enough. Water surged from the dam spillway, a controlled rush that roared down the hill, straight toward the ceremony. Gas erupted as muddy water flooded the staked-out land, swallowing orange markers and pooling around the bulldozers. Margaret's microphone cut out, her face frozen in shock as her pristine heels sank into the muck. The crowd scattered, reporters scrambling for footage. I stood by the dam, watching the chaos unfold, my pulse racing with a mix of fear and triumph. The water wasn't deep, knee-high at most, but it was enough to ruin their ceremony and expose their arrogance. The HOA's future homes were now a swamp, their glossy plans reduced to soggy paper. Margaret's eyes found mine across the crowd, her composure cracking as she realized I'd done this. I didn't flinch. This was my land, my fight, and I'd just drawn the line. But as the water slowed and the crowd's shouts grew louder, a new fear gripped me. Had I gone too far? The sheriff's siren wailed in the distance, and I knew the real battle was just beginning. The siren's wail cut through the chaos like a knife, pulling me back to the reality of what I'd done. Water lapped at the edges of the flooded site, turning the HOA's pristine groundbreaking into a muddy mess. Margaret's face, usually a mask of calculated calm, twisted in fury as she sloshed through the ankle-deep torrent, her designer's suit ruined. The crowd milled in confusion, some laughing nervously, others snapping photos on their phones. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrusting forward, capturing the spectacle for the evening news. I stood by the dam, my hands still tingling from the valve's cold metal, watching as the sheriff's cruiser pulled up, lights flashing. Had I crossed the line from defender to destroyer? My heart hammered, but beneath the fear, a quiet satisfaction bloomed. This was the turning point, the moment Willow Creek Estate's arrogance cracked wide open. The sheriff, a burly man named Hank who'd known my family for years, stepped out, his boots splashing in the water. He surveyed the scene, his expression a mix of exasperation and amusement. Margaret charged toward him, pointing accusingly at me. I could see her lips moving rapidly, no doubt spinning tales of sabotage and destruction. But Hank held up a hand, his gaze shifting to me. I walked down the hill, my steps deliberate, the injunction papers clutched in my pocket. "Tom," he said, his voice low enough to cut through the murmurs. "What in the hell happened here?" I explained. The rezoning loophole, the missing environmental review, the dam's legal right to release water for maintenance. The flooding wasn't random. It was a demonstration, time to halt the illegal groundbreaking. Hank nodded slowly, pulling out his radio. Backup arrived, and soon the site was cordoned off, the bulldozer silenced. Word spread like wildfire through Willow Creek. By evening, local news channels buzzed with footage of the dam debacle, as they dubbed it. Viewers saw Margaret's soaked figure, the renderings floating in puddles. The HOA's dreams literally washed away. Social media exploded. Hashtags like hashtag HOAFail and hashtag FarmersFightBack trended, with memes of bulldozers sinking in mud. For the first time, the community saw the HOA not as progress makers, but as bullies overreaching their bounds. Residents who'd suffered under Margaret's petty rules started sharing stories. The fine flower beds, the threatened liens, the endless meetings where dissent was squashed. A petition circulated online, demanding her resignation. I watched it all from my farmhouse, the dam's reservoir now calm, as if nothing had happened. The legal fallout hit hard and fast. Carl, my attorney, moved like a man possessed. The injunction I'd filed that morning was granted within hours, citing the environmental risks the HOA had ignored. The county board, embarrassed by the viral footage, launched an investigation into the rezoning process. Turns out, Margaret had greased palms, campaign donations to key officials, backroom deals that bypassed public notices. Emails surfaced, leaked by an anonymous HOA insider, showing her dismissing my property rights as irrelevant obstacles. The board revoked the permits, halting all construction indefinitely. My land was mine again, the chain-link fence torn down by county workers the next day. I walked those fields, the soil still damp, and felt a weight lift from my chest. No more stakes, no more threats, just open acres under the sky. But the victory wasn't just about reclaiming dirt. The HOA faced a reckoning. Fines poured in from the county for environmental violations. The uncontrolled development had risked contaminating local waterways, a fact the flood ironically highlighted. Willow Creek Estate shelled out thousands in cleanup costs, their legal fund depleted by lawsuits from residents who'd invested in the promised expansion. Margaret, the untouchable queen, crumbled under the scrutiny. She resigned amid scandal, her law license under review for ethical breaches. Whispers said she moved out of state, her reputation in tatters. The board, humbled, elected new leadership, a mix of longtime residents who vowed transparency and fairness. No more arbitrary rules. Community input became mandatory. The absurdity of it all, the pettiness that had nearly destroyed my life, faded into a cautionary tale. Long term, the consequences rippled far beyond Willow Creek. The story went national, picked up by outlets covering rural-urban clashes. Farmers across the country shared similar battles against encroaching developments, inspired to dig into their deeds and fight back. Legislation stirred in the state capitol, pushing for stricter HOA regulations and better protections for legacy landowners. My phone rang off the hook with interview requests, but I kept it simple. This was about standing up when pushed too far. Financially, I came out ahead. The HOA settled out of court, paying damages that cover my legal fees, and then some. I used the money to modernize the farm, installing solar panels and upgrading the dam for better efficiency. My fields thrived that next season, the corn standing tall, as if celebrating the win. Yet, the impact ran deeper, touching the soul of the community. Neighbors from the estates started crossing the old divide. A family brought pies to my door, apologizing for the HOA's overreach. Joggers waved with genuine smiles, and a few even volunteered during harvest. The gated world of my rural one blurred, fostering an uneasy but real harmony. I'd lost sleep, savings, and faith in people during the fight, but gained something profound: resilience. The dam, once a relic, became a symbol, proof that quiet strength could overwhelm bluster. Looking back, the HOA's greed exposed the fragility of unchecked power. They built empires on paper, but forgot the human element, the unbreakable ties to land and legacy. I watched it flow that day, not just water, but justice, washing away the unfairness that had festered too long. And in the end, it left the ground fertile for something better. What would you do if someone tried to steal your home? Would you fight or let the current carry you away? Share your stories in the comments. Maybe your tale could inspire the next victory against the Karens of the world.